It's a great pleasure to have you today on our podcast. Thank you very much for coming. And can you please briefly introduce yourself and tell our listeners where you are joining us from? From what part of the world?
Yes,
You.
sure. Glad to. Yes. So my name is Chad Bouton. I'm here in New York. I'm at the Feinstein Institutes for Medical Research at Northwell Health, and just outside the city. And glad to join you today.
Thank you so much. And today we are talking about the groundbreaking research you have been conducting, restoring lasting movement and sensation in humans.
Yes.
Which was nominated for BCI Award in 2023. Congratulations.
Yes.
Can you maybe briefly summarize this research for our listeners? Of course, we will go more in depth, but just a brief summary for now. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, no, it's been exciting in terms of the research, and also it's been a team effort. We have an incredible team here. Lucky to work with them every day, and so I'll talk about the work that they all did. And this has been something we've been wanting to do for a number of years. We've been integrating both the BCI brain computer interface, and in this case, an implantable one that is involves five electrode arrays in both motor and sensory areas of the brain. And we are linking those not only to muscle activation for allowing a paralyzed individual to move again, but also to feel objects. And lastly, we call it a double neural bypass because we also are linking the BCI to spinal cord stimulation. And that allows someone to think about different types of movements, and the stimulation is automatically tailored and tuned to those movements. And so we've seen some great results so far in terms of the spinal cord stimulation, allowing increased strength, in fact, doubling the participant strength. And we've also been seeing lasting effects for sensation in some areas. And we've been looking at the wrist and hand. And so that's been exciting as well.
Thank you so much for this introduction. Now, because we have a neurocareer oriented podcast, I would like to ask you, how did you come to this point when you are leading this groundbreaking research? What brought you to the field of neurotechnologies, brain computer interfaces, and now even invasive brain computer interfaces? So, can you just tell it to our listeners who are just looking maybe to start this journey? Thank
Yes.
you.
It's exciting. I'm glad your listeners are kind of earlier in their careers and making some decisions about where to go next. And I think BCI is an exciting field, growing. It's growing very rapidly. I started almost more than 20 years ago in the field, and part of what really drew me into it is two things. First, the incredible challenge where we're doing things that have not been tried before in many cases. We're trying to understand the language of the neurons in the brain. We call it cracking the neural code. So as we try to do that, it's very, very challenging and exciting. But also there was a personal aspect to it where many years ago when I was in grad school, I had my own injury. I had a traumatic brain injury, in fact. And so I went through a life-saving operation and also months of therapy and tried to really recover from this injury. And also, I had lost the ability to speak. So I had expressive aphasia, and I went through months of speech therapy and trying to literally learn how to speak again. And so after going through all of that, and then just a few years later, having this opportunity to work in the area of brain computer interfaces and allowing, and helping folks that either are locked in from a spinal cord injury or a stroke, in one case, stroke and also ALS, I thought this is something, I really have to do. And it was not only challenging, but rewarding to see the prospect for helping folks become more independent. And so I jumped on the opportunity, and I've never looked back since. I've been doing it for my entire career, or most of my career, and it's such a great field, and I think anyone that's thinking about it should jump at the opportunity as well.
Mhm. Thank you so much. It's very inspiring story. And can you maybe give a little bit more details about your background and the skills that really helped you on this journey that made what you do possible?
Absolutely. So, yeah, my background was, well, really, as an undergrad, I studied electrical engineering and control theory and system theory. Systems theory will really help you, look at networks and you look at communication and information theory, and then control theory is all about closing the loop. Well, later in grad school, I started to do more in terms of advanced control architectures and approaches, and then later started to integrate machine learning. And then when the BCI field, started taking off, and I was involved at the very early stages, it became clear that this is a bit of a controls problem, controls theory problem, and information theory, and also certainly a systems theory problem. And I like to say that the human nervous system is one of the most complex control systems on the planet. And if you think about all of the nested loops and regulated processes that are happening at the same time, there's a lot of parallel, massively parallel networks that are operating at the same time. And so, but everything has to work in harmony. So we spent years trying to understand this. And if someone has had an injury or a stroke, and now these elegant balanced pathways or control loops are completely interrupted and disrupted or damaged, this this throws everything into the wind, and we have to figure out now how do you help someone relearn the ability to move again, and for example, and this is now where we're putting a chip in the brain and we're closing that loop, but in a different way. We're actually bypassing the injury or the stroke affected area. And when you do that, you've created an artificial, what we call a neural bypass, or an electronic or artificial neural bypass. Okay, so now you still have the visual system, and you have to understand that the participant or the user is still processing the visual information and still making their own corrections. But then you have this artificial neural bypass that is processing, decoding, and rerouting these signals so that when someone thinks about they want to move their hand or open or close it again, the muscles are stimulated automatically. But a lot is happening at the same time. So anyway, so those are the areas you can study: control theory, machine learning, obviously statistics. That's required, but different types of engineering, and really to go heavy on the systems control theory and the machine learning would be my advice. And now, we've been doing recurrent neural networks, and it's a form of, and even some deeper networks that are, another form of AI. And right now, of course, we know, not only is BCI taking off as a field, but the field of AI is now hitting another inflection point. So it's very exciting, and looking at those combinations would be a place that anybody early in their career could go.
Mhm. Thank you so much. And we have actually quite a few students joining the field of brain computer interfaces from engineering with background in machine learning. And they're all asking, how much do we need to know from neuroscience perspective to work in the field? You didn't mention explicitly any neuroscience related topics. So maybe you can comment on this a little bit. How much do we need to know to be successful in this?
Yes, that's a great point and question. Neuroscience is extremely important, and we have two neuroscientists in our lab. And so when you think about this field, it's absolutely multidisciplinary. I think you have to learn a little bit from each field. You have to then decide, okay, well, which areas do I want to go deeper into? You need to have some expertise and strength, and at least one or two, if not two or three, because the more you know, the better, and you can help connect dots between the different fields. But as far as neuroscience specifically, yes, it's extremely helpful. But also keep in mind that a lot of these things we're learning are coming from brand new questions that we're asking. They're brand new experiments in many cases. experiments that no one has tried before. So we're learning. Obviously, you want to understand the basics and in terms of neuroscience. But a lot of this is not in the textbooks yet. So maybe someday it will be. We've written a number of book chapters now. We've or contributed to ones. We've written some. We've written some more recent review papers that people can go and look at. We had one starts out historical perspectives on brain-computer interfaces or implantable brain-computer interfaces in sensory motor function and restoration, and that it kind of talks about some of the history and obviously you want to understand these different areas, but everyone's going to gravitate to whatever gets them most excited. Whether that's machine learning, whether that's neuroscience, or some of the hardcore engineering. So microfabrication and the hardcore engineering around creating these electrodes that can live in the brain's the brain environment and be able to survive and be in a chronic application. In other words, lasting for years. In these cases, to be useful and be used in the home, you want to have these interfaces last a long time. So yeah, there's many choices on what areas to study, and obviously you can't be an expert in everything. But I always say you should have at least two depth areas so that you can kind of look at and have that cross pollination and really connect dots. Some of the most exciting innovations come from combining ideas from two different disparate fields, and there's no difference here in the BCI world. So definitely try to mix different fields and really go after it.
Thank you. And from your perspective, what are the most in demand specialists right now in the BCI field? With what knowledge and skills?
Yeah, that's a hard question to answer, but I would say uh, it's like saying, if you have more than one child, which one's your favorite child? It's hard to say, but but all those areas are exciting. I would say they're all important, but I would say machine learning, of course, is going to continue to be extremely important, especially when you're talking about large amounts of data. So big data here is really relevant, and being able to, train deeper networks, for example, requires handling even more data, more training data. That's the drawback of using deeper and larger networks. But that's definitely a really important area. And again, I'll mention microfabrication because in fact, we're kind of a little bit ahead on machine learning now with the latest inflection, and AI is really advancing rapidly, but we can't get enough information out of the brain, and we certainly can't get enough information back into the brain, except for maybe using the visual field, which right now has the high bandwidth. But and we have Paradromics and other companies working on getting, much more channels, more electrodes packed into more dense, packed into tighter spaces. So higher density arrays. And that involves, of course, microfabrication and also material science. Past teams that I've, put together have in many cases have involved material scientists as well. So, yeah, it's very hard to say which one's most important. All of those areas are extremely important. Biomedical engineering, of course, and also one thing I haven't mentioned is clinical experience working with patients, working with potential users or adopters of the technology is really important. Having that ability to get into the lab or even the home environment in some cases and interacting and understanding how to design experiments, but also, and these are that involve human subjects, human participants, right? So having experience with human participants in clinical studies is also really critical.
Thank you so much. And my next question is about something you mentioned at the beginning that you wanted to do this study that you've done for a long time.
Yeah.
And finally, you did it. So, what was preventing you from making this possible earlier? And what facilitated, what helped you to finally do it?
Yeah, great question. So early on, after I entered into the BCI field, I had the opportunity to work on the original BrainGate program with John Donahue, Lee Hochberg, and others, and what an exciting experience that was. And But a few years later, we started our own study, kind of, trying to explore different areas, and we looked at connecting a BCI in real time, decoding the movement intentions, and linking it to muscle activation, and allowing someone to actually recover volitional movement of their hand. And so and we were able to do that. It was very, very exciting. But one of the challenges we ran into, and then, by the way, that was Ian Burkhart, who was our participant for that study. Um, and uh, but one thing he said during a session was that he couldn't feel the objects. He couldn't feel the objects he was, now able to pick up and move and use, and he could even take a drink out of a mug, or a cup. But the issue was he couldn't feel the object, so he wouldn't know if he was, say, squeezing too hard. And if I have your typical cup, it's very easy to over squeeze, and you might have hot coffee in it or something like that. And so it's very practical, very important. You can't button a shirt without having tactile feedback, because you need to feel the edge of the button to be able to feed it through the hole or the slot. And so we realized at that moment, we need to try to restore movement and sensation at the same time, again in real time, and close that loop finally completely. And so that was almost more than 10 years ago when we, first, thought about that problem. And then about almost 9 years ago, just in a couple months, we'll hit the 9-year mark. We went ahead and set out to go ahead and put the entire protocol together and start developing all the technology and system required, and go to the FDA and the IRB and so on. And it took a number of years, and assemble an even larger team. And so through the years, we also had to do some acute experiments where we did some fMRI work, where we mapped specific motor and sensory areas in M1 and S1, so primary sensory and primary somatosensory, or motor and primary somatosensory. And we even mapped it to the fingers. So we wanted to really pinpoint where each finger was: thumb, index. Those were our two targets, but we looked at other fingers too. And the idea was, of course, to be able to restore sensation as close to the tips of the fingers as possible. And so we did a number of studies with a number of individuals, and in trying to find those areas and then record and stimulate in those areas. And we were successful in finding the areas, but sometimes the fingertips were deeper into the sulcus, so they weren't up on the gyrus, where we needed those areas to be, so that we could put the array, the electrode array, which is a Utah style array. It requires a flat surface, or relatively flat surface, and on the gyri. So on one of the gyri. So basically, we found and mapped those areas, found the fingertips, and fortunately, we were able to enroll an individual and go through all the mapping and find those areas. And we're even able to awaken this individual during the surgery for a brief period. And we stimulated the areas where we thought we should be going, where we had mapped. And lo and behold, they reported not only sensation in the thumb and the index, but the tips of the index and the thumb. And we lucked. We had a little bit of luck and a lot of work, a lot of preparation that the team did. And but we got it. And so now we're able to stimulate areas, and participant continues many months. It's been about a year now, and he's still reporting sensation that's evoked in his fingertip, and some areas in the thumb. And then also we see an area in the wrist that is starting to have sensation, natural sensation, even after we turn off the bypass, the electronic neural bypass, or this double neural bypass now, and turn everything off. And he's maintaining sensation now in the wrist. And this was after we did something new that we call, cortical mirroring, where we actually looking at patterns that happen in the sensory area, and then turning around and doing some techniques to try to activate those areas. So hopefully in the coming months, we'll have more out on that. But so far as progress has been tremendous.
Yes, that's amazing. Do you have any hypothesis how this happens, that the sensation is being restored? What mechanisms are underlying it? At least
Right. So
preliminary, yes.
Right, right. And yeah, so this is all very preliminary and we're still analyzing data, but and it's an N equals one so far, right? For the proof of concept. But our hypothesis was that if we could stimulate the spinal cord and modulate the spinal cord while we're also stimulating different areas of the brain, and record from those areas too, that we could perhaps promote plasticity at the spinal cord level, and maybe even a little bit in the brain to kind of allow those areas to be a little more sensitive to tactile information that's ascending into the brain, into S1. So we think that it's probably a combination of plasticity, potentially in both areas, but we certainly are stimulating the spinal cord through the dorsal roots, right? So we're doing transcutaneous spinal cord stimulation, and then we are at the same time stimulating specific areas of the brain. So we will look at this over the months, and we'll see what happens. We unfortunately can't, we can't go in and do surgery or dissect, and see what's happening in the area. But we do have clinical outcomes and measures that show us not only has the participant's strength increased significantly, but again, the sensation has improved as well. So more to come on that. We hope to collect more data and hopefully publish findings in the coming months. But so far it's been very exciting. And at the end of the day, the goal is to hopefully allow someone to get stronger, a little more independent, get some sensation back. And then there may be still certain areas where you're still using the brain interface and muscle stimulation or even active orthoses to help assist with movement and sensation. But then if there's also some plasticity that happens over time in certain areas, that's fantastic. Our goal and our approach has always been, to combine the two, not to just, drop one or only do one, but to combine the two, because at the end of the day, someone who's been affected by paralysis or by an injury or a stroke, they want to be able to have some immediate assistance and be able to do some daily activities by themselves, independently. But then they also, over time, would like to get stronger if they can in certain areas too. And that's been our approach, and it seems to be very promising so far.
Thank you so much. And if I remember correctly, and please let me know if I'm wrong, I remember that there were some reports that Ian Bernhardt also developed some type of restoration of movement. There was some effect of the stimulation that lasted. I might be wrong.
Well, with Ian, there was a little bit of change in his EMG, but there were, in that case, we did not do spinal cord stimulation,
Yes.
and so
Yeah.
we didn't see, combined with the brain interface. So we didn't see significant like changes. So I'll give you an example with our participant last year here in New York, and the study that I was describing that we planned for the last 8 plus years. Keith, has, and this is public now, Keith saw 110, over 100%, 110% so far in terms of increased strength and bicep activation and force that he actually can generate. So now he's gone from being able to only not lift his arms off the wheelchair armrest, but now can lift both of his arms all the way up to his face and scratch his chin if he needs to, even get to his mouth. And so the latest that actually combines the bidirectional or the double neural bypass along with the plasticity gains that he's seen. We actually have a device that he can control in terms of his hand and finger flexion. He can think about opening his hand, closing it, picking up an object, and he can bring it to his mouth. So if he wants to, say, feed himself or take a drink, that's what we're working towards. And now he can also feel objects. And so that's been really only since we have been combining spinal cord stimulation and the BCI itself. So now it's intention driven, thought driven, but yet modulates the exact correct areas for promoting significant plasticity. So where you can see hopefully 100 or even higher percent, doubling or even tripling strength. We had some other participants in the past with just spinal cord stimulation alone that also saw these large increases. Um, it's really important to promote that plasticity in the interneuronal networks of the spinal cord. You have to strengthen pathways. In most cases, if someone is in a spinal cord injury, their cord has been damaged, but it's not been severed. We did have one individual many years ago who, where the cord was severed because of a stabbing incident. But in most cases, there's damage from compression and the vertebrae, being fractured and then shifting. And there's still pathways there that you can work with and strengthen. That's the key.
Thank you so much. It's really amazing, amazing results. And I'm looking forward to following up on what you do. Can you maybe summarize in few bullet points what were the innovations of your project, something that have has never been done before, that you had in your study?
Yeah, so there has been some great work in spinal cord stimulation, and there's even been some great work with the lower extremities, the legs, in terms of combining BCI and spinal cord. But our study is the first time, as far as we are aware, that where we are looking at activating hand movement and combining spinal cord stimulation with actual intracortical stimulation. So precise stimulation based on the recording. So we record to look at the patterns and so that we know exactly where to stimulate. And that's that cortical mirroring. And we're combining brain stimulation and spinal cord stimulation along with a full closed loop BCI. And that we believe is the first time that's been done anywhere, for a body part. And then it just happens to be specifically, we're also tackling the hand, and because the hand is extremely complex. It's been a very daunting, very tough problem. But the hand is also a huge unmet need, and restoring hand movement is so critical.
Thank you. And related to this question, the next question, what became possible after you completed this project that wasn't possible before?
Yes, we are seeing a couple things that one in particular that hasn't happened before, as far as again that we're aware. So not only do you see the strength and increase in motor capability, that's quite a jump. Uh, and it's now allowing functional movement, but also we're seeing, we believe, for the first time, sensory plasticity, sensory changes. And let me explain how, why that is or how that is. So we've seen for years from our work and other colleagues' work that you can evoke tactile percepts or sensations, and you can do that by stimulating different parts of the brain. But what we've looked at is, can you stimulate different areas of the brain in a way that will cause lasting effects, plasticity, so that you can stop stimulating, turn it off, and have a gain in sensation that is now there for good. So natural sensation, and it's lasting. And so far, we're seeing some promising. We gave a little hint at this last year, but now we have data that's confirming. We seem to be seeing lasting sensory increases or sensation in some areas that had zero by clinical assessments, by the way. So we try to use clinical assessments in everything we do. So by using standard tactile clinical assessments, we're seeing areas that had zero sensation now showing sensation. In fact, is even improved in terms of the level of sensation. Still not all the way to normal yet, but making progress. So, and that's lasted now. We've even turned off the stimulation for a few months, and it seems that we're still seeing the lasting effects. But we're taking even more data, and again, we hope to be speaking more about that. But it looks very promising, very exciting.
Yes, thank you. And what is your next step? What would you like to achieve in your next study?
Yes, next steps will include further improvement in movement. We want to see even more plasticity, even more increases in other areas and other muscles. And the goal is to get to even more functional type movements. We're already seeing useful movements, but we want to really push things even more distally towards the wrist and fingers, and move that goalpost down the road here. And then on the sensory side, we want to expand where we're seeing some plasticity already, but we're going to expand that into more areas. And then the goal is to bring it all together to where this double neural bypass is really fully operational, so that the participant is moving and feeling and interacting with real world objects. Just recently, we're starting to see progress, and our participant was able to pick up a cup by himself with just his using his thoughts, and was able to take a drink for the first time as well. And that was very, very, and could feel the cup. That's the other important part, so that he could we're just starting to see that, where he can start to adjust his grip, and we're working on that, closing that loop completely. And the other one other exciting thing is that we're working on for the future is what we call cooperative research, or cooperative type sessions, where we will have two individuals interacting, potentially through even the BCI. So keep an eye out for that down the road. And we have had some interesting results where our participant Keith actually was able to use his thoughts about hand movement to control another person's arm and hand. We had a volunteer where they had a wireless device that we've developed, and they were wearing it, and Keith was able to open and close their hand. And to top that, he was even able to feel through some tactile sensors. He could feel as they touched different objects. So more to come on that. And at SFN, we'll be having a number of posters talking about these different areas. The team will be presenting, um, and posters, and one of the nano symposiums as well.
Yeah.
This is happening, coming down the road, and we're going to try to keep going. And we have some other studies as well that have been launched, and starting to look at these approaches even in the area of stroke. That's been another goal of ours for some time, and we're starting to head into that direction.
Thank you so much. And the last question before we end our podcast is, what would be your advice for those who are starting in the field and want to follow your footsteps and also do this amazing type
Oh,
of
well,
research?
don't follow exactly in my footsteps, because I kind of did this. But I would say, but life is never a direct path, right? We do a lot of this meandering. I would say try different things, get the clinical experience. I would say, get into a lab, but don't focus on just one thing. Try to learn different things, because you might find out you're actually as excited or more excited about another field or subfield. So try different things, okay? And plus, it makes you stronger in terms of your ability to contribute to teams if you've tried different things as well. You can still figure out where you want to specialize, but try lots of things. And I would say get that clinical experience, hands-on. I'm very much about hands-on. I still love going into the lab. I was just down in the lab a few hours ago, and interacting with the team, obviously, but the participants too. You learn so much by talking to participants and your teammates. And I always say communication is so critical within the team, and within with your collaborators, and with the participants. Listen a lot. Have those conversations, have lots of communication, and get exposed to lots of different areas. Try different things for sure. That would be my advice. Try as many different things as you can, and try to find at least two depth areas, not just one, but try to get these two depth areas that you're training on. Um, and then life will take you in the right direction, as long as you follow your heart follow what gives you what I call the good butterfly. So you want to follow those things that like, wow, that really gave me a little excitement. Things that make your hair stand up on the back of your neck, and chase those things, and always work on things that are important. Important not only to you, but to the world. Try to, I always try to, I told my kids, find what you're passionate about, and something that where you can leave the world a little better than how you found it. I think that's the key.
Thank you very much, Professor Bouton. It was a great pleasure to have you on our podcast. We all listeners are wishing you all possible success, and we will be following your journey. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Great to